Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Um, I'm going to be very honest. I almost didn't go live this morning because there was a part of me that didn't want to um, do this particular topic. But I've come to kind of accept is this is a very important issue. And the issue today is, what do you do when you can't escape the stressor? So if you're not familiar, my name is Andre Bright. I'm a burnout recovery coach, burnout prevention coach as well. So don't think you need to be within burnout to be able to come to me, because prevention is better than cure, right? Um, I've been doing a series of lives in the mornings, and one of the things I talk about is very specific elements of burnout: what it is to experience it, what it is to avoid it, what it is to recover from it, what people's experiences have been, and how rangeful they can be, so that you're not sitting there thinking that you don't have it when you do, and you're not thinking you do have it when you don't. Um, One of the things that I talk about is the difference between the stress and the stressor. Now, the stress is what happens within your body. It's your adrenaline, it's the way you feel, the sensations you experience, the choke in your throat, the way you're physically shaking when something happens and you're experiencing rage. It's the emotions within your body, the thoughts that happen, your negative thoughts, your limiting beliefs, all those kind of things, your self-image. It's the anger, it's the fatigue, it's the emotional drain, it's all of that kind of stuff. That's the stress that's happening within your body. It's within your person, your body, your spirit, your mind, your soul, your heart. The stressor is what causes that. It's the triggers externally. It's the people at work. It's the international events. It's the deadlines that are coming up, or the future that you're trying to cater for, or the past that you're trying to deal with. It's the things that are happening externally, outside of your present physical body. Um, much of which you don't have control over, but you can influence. One of the things that we talk about as coaches or therapists or any of those kind of supportive roles is, there's certain things you can control, which is yourself. It's what you do, how you think, how you react to certain things. Those are the things you can control. What you can't necessarily control is what other people do, is the things that might be in place, but you can influence them. Like, you have a role to play in all of this, right? And as a coach, one of the things we might say is that, okay, cool, this thing is happening. This is a stressor. This is an event that's happening in your life, right? You may not be able to control it, but what can you do? Breathing techniques. You can work on your self-care. You can work on how you're looking at the situation. You can work on what your belief systems are that's creating it. It's the meanings that you put on these things, right? And we can absolutely do that. But what happens when, no matter what you do with yourself, the environment remains the same? The structures remain the same, the patterns remain the same, the pressures remain the same. After a while, even your stress, dealing with your stress isn't going to be enough to counter that, because anybody in that situation would feel the same way. And it's not about you anymore. Like, it gets to the point where you can dumb down the effects as much as you like, but if you continue to have to be in these environments, have to be in these situations, then you're going to continuously be under stress. It's just going to keep coming. And today, what happens when you can't escape the stress? And the reason for this topic is, and I'm going to give you a trigger warning now, okay? There are certain things that are happening within the world. We have wars, we have natural disasters, we have horrific crimes that are going on. And one of them for me that was a trigger a few days ago, I haven't spoken about. And I tend not to. I tend to be like the action guy. When things happen, I go into my cave. I think, what can I do? And I either give, or I set up a space for people to talk, or I find who's doing the work and support them, or I create a CIC or something, or like I do work. Like I tend to channel my emotions into the doing. But what ends up happening is I over skip over in the motion. And I say this because in a moment, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff you can practically do when you're experiencing a situation where there are stressors, right? But my experience of it is going to that by default and over and skipping over the me part. So I actually deal with a stressor without dealing with the stress. So I'm on the opposite end of that scale. So I'm going to try and look at the whole framework, the whole window of this, because I think it's really important. I'm not going to say the name. I'm not going to talk about the situation. But during the pandemic, there was a racial, there was police brutality, right? And it brought to the surface institutional racism that was happening at a structural scale, right? It wasn't necessarily just a person to person thing. It is stuff that is built within the framework of society, right? And this affected a shift in people, especially within businesses. You started to see DEI coming through. You started to see all these efforts for people to change. You started to see all these efforts to people to provide equity, and you had all these allies and things like that. What ends up happening? I read a book called The New Jim Crow, and it talked about the way racism changes as opposed to disappears. It's very overt, and then there'll be something institutional, structural that happens that changes, and then it becomes slightly less overt. It becomes more covert, and then more covert and covert. And what ends up happening is it just changes its clothes into something different. So over this, since the pandemic, I've noticed that the talk about all that kind of stuff has started to decline, but the stats haven't really changed. It's just the talking about it has changed. And over the last few days, my timeline has been bombarded with yet another situation of a mother of two who, yeah, I won't go into the details for anyone, just in case it's a trigger warning, a trigger, but you all know who I'm talking about. She's not the only one, but it's and yet another one that has rise to the surface, where we are now on a global level aware of things, and we're reminded of what we thought maybe had subsided, but it hasn't. And I want to link this to burnout, because one of the things that I found is this idea of trauma. Okay, so burnout isn't just a physical thing. It's not just about not being able to do the task ahead of you. Most of the time, to be honest with you, it's about something behind it. There's something that hasn't been dealt with, or there's a capacity issue, or there's a self-belief or self whatever issue, which is meaning that the idea of the basic things seems overwhelming to you because of how you're processing or not processing other things that are going on in your life. A lot of it is an emotional issue. In a situation where things are happening along the world, you may be aware of trauma and how it works, right? So trauma is when there's often when there's an event which attaches a very high emotional quotient attached to it. So this is something that's an extreme. Your senses are high, and it's often in a negative way, right? And so what happens is this trauma event happens, and then because it was so heightened in that moment, it becomes a trigger. And what a trigger is that your current present is attached to your past. It might be a smell, it might be a taste, it might be a touch, it might be a sound, it might be a person, it might be a place. Something brings you back to that moment, and that trauma becomes a trigger. And in your present, all the emotions, all the sounds, all the senses that happened back then are brought into the present, which means it's very difficult to break, right? So you have to deal with the what happened. You have to face what happened to be able to be free from it. But what happens as well is you have what's called social trauma. This means that you are emotionally connected to, which you didn't experience yourself. Okay. So in this case, there are things that are horrible, brutal, that happen within the world. We are in the world where you see it online, sometimes live, right? You see it on your phone. You see it in bed when you're on the commute. You see it while you're at work in the bathroom taking a break. You see it happen in front of you, and you feel something as a result. And that feeling doesn't leave you just because you turn it off. And that becomes, like use the fizzy bottle example, that becomes another trigger during your day. But then what happens if every time you open your phone, you see it, and it becomes something that follows you through your day and your nights, when you're with your children, when you're with your friends? It becomes a topic of conversation. And every time it's brought up to your mind, it's like resetting the counter of healing. So every time the name comes up, the hashtag, the video footage, the police cam, all of those things come up, it becomes like you're at day one again, moment one, and it starts the process all over again. Um, when you're in a stage when you get bombarded with this all, what do? You know this thing exists. You know that there's you can walk out today. There's a lot of people who are actually scared to bring children into this life because of our awareness of how the world is working right now. It's a very current issue that many are aware of, to the point where it's having an impact on your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, your spiritual health. You're starting to doubt um, beliefs, the things that have held you through some tough times. Like, you're starting to doubt the idea that there will ever be an end. You're starting to doubt the idea that you or anybody else will be okay. There's fear during a normal day to a level that you haven't experienced before. For some of you, it's exactly the same as it has always been, and you can't remember a time when you weren't living in fear, when you weren't making decisions from a place of fear, when you weren't navigating this life being hyper aware of who is around you and the impact you're having on people, and who are meant to be your allies and who aren't, and who you can trust and who you don't. All of this can add to this idea of stress that builds up within the body, which, when it's unmanaged, can lead towards burnout. And burnout can show up in all kinds of different ways. You lash out at the people who are closest to you. You lose your sense of taste, smell, touch. You experience headaches, backaches. You start to fall into negative coping mechanisms. You might start drinking, taking drugs, or whatever it is, just to numb the pain. Or you might feel completely numbed. You can't feel anything anymore. You feel detached from anything that happens. All this stuff that used to bring you emotion, you don't feel a thing anymore. You see it on screen and you just keep scrolling, right? All of these are signs that you might be experiencing burnout. But how does the combination of burnout and social trauma be challenging? Today, I'm talking about specifically for Black individuals because of the events that are happening, or those who are from Palestine or any of those other places. If you're from Congo, the things I find that's crazy, Sierra Leone is where I'm from, right? And we had a 10-year civil war. Now, I was in school at the time. I was very hyper aware of the things that were happening back home, and it wasn't reaching the masses. It wasn't on screen. It was only really the last year or so, when the British got involved, that it started to, really start to be televised. But imagine being in school, being aware that your friends, your family at home could die at any moment, that you get a call that another auntie has died, another cousin has died, and you're currently in this state of stress, but you have to go to school and do your homework, and you have to go and be functional, right? And a lot of you are experiencing right now, you're very aware. Some of you have families and friends in places where they're not being televised, or maybe they are being televised, and you're very emotionally attached to these occurrences that are happening in the world, and you have to go to work. There's no sick leave for this, you know. Trying to explain to a excuse me, trying to explain to your employer that something is happening back home and you're finding it difficult to work might not be something that you're used to. Now, I said there's no sick leave for this, but there actually is. This is something which I had to really, acknowledge that culturally, I was from a place where we hold work at high reverence. And so we don't actually take the time off that we need. Whereas now, people champion it. Take that sick leave. I promise you, you know, go to your HR, talk about your mental health and well-being programs that you might have as part of work. They actually design things into them. Like your workplace has insurance for this stuff to be able to pay for someone to cover your leave if you need to take a few months off to recover and all that kind of stuff. But just know that if it's for these social trauma issues, even after a few months, you're going to come back and there might be something else. So what do you do? So what do you do when it's a systemic issue? I've talked about experiences of global issues. I've talked about a few things like that. There's a thing about injustice. There was this quote that said something along the lines of, your inner child is sacred and needs safety. Your inner teen is angry and needs justice. Your inner adult is tired and needs peace. And in a time like today, I feel like my inner teen is aroused right now. My inner teen is angry. My inner teen is experiencing rage, and it requires justice that isn't going to happen overnight. Because, in the words of James Baldwin, how much time do we need? This has been going on for generations. Everyone I know who's alive right now can tell of a story of when they were a child hearing about something. Even my grandparents were born into something where systematically things were going on. So what do you do? And today I want to talk about coping strategies. This part of me wants to talk about the emotional side of things, but let me go through my lists, and then we'll see if there's anything that arouses that you think, okay, I need this. Then let me know. If there's any questions, comments, or thoughts, share it, and I'll go along. So one of the things to pay attention to is coping strategies when these things are happening in the world, right? There are practical things, there are emotional things that you can do to help, and they can help cope with social trauma. Things like seeking opportunities, support from community organizations, or supporting them. Therapy is a big one, though. I find that for me, therapy was life-changing. It helped me understand myself. It helped me deal with certain things in the moment. Like, so what do you do when you're in work and your phone pings and you hit that notification and you get a grieving, like a really triggering image or a triggering video or a triggering headline, but you're in the middle at work and you're trying to get this deadline through? What do you do? Right? Therapy really helped me because it gave me tools to do in the moment, just to give me enough time to process whatever I'm feeling. And then I could be functional, and then I can create time in my day to actually look at it properly, right? Because sometimes, to be real, it's difficult to deal with it in all its essence in the moment. You might be doing something, you might be in the middle of something, and you don't have the time, because this thing needs time to process. And if you haven't processed anything that you've experienced or seen or heard through your life so far, I encourage you to create time to do it. Time may not just land in your lap. You need to create time. One of the things I found with therapy, it might be 55 minutes where I'm talking to the therapist and he's bringing up all this stuff into the surface, but I needed days, sometimes weeks, to be able to process some of the stuff that came up. Like, I needed time to sit through that. And I often wondered how I managed to do it up till the time when I had someone who was actually there for me to teach me these things. I just wing it. And I think most of us do. We just wing it. All this stuff is happening in our lives and in the world and in our communities, and we just wing it. We kind of like, oh my gosh, this is happening, but I need to go to my next day. We don't look at what's going on. We don't process how we feel about things. We don't even say anything. Like, something might happen and someone might ask, hey, are you okay? And we're like, no, I'm cool. We're not cool. Like, there's something about actually saying, no, I'm enraged. If I hear another thing that happens, I'm going to lash at somebody. I actually need some time to disappear for a moment to figure out what is going on in the world and where I sit within it. I don't feel like I feel safe within this workplace, within this building, within this city, within this institution. I don't feel like you've got my back. I don't feel like you care. Like, we need space to actually communicate these things. I remember being during the George Floyd situation, being asked to write it wasn't exactly a toolkit, but it was basically a response, to write a response around it. And I basically said no. Right. And I wrote this long letter, and it's probably the third draft that I issued, because the first one was just enraged. But the third one was kind of like, and the second one was, first one was enraged, right? I just needed to get it out. Second one was too tampered. But the third one I find was like the equilibrium. It was like the Goldilocks complex. But I basically said that in a situation like this, it's down to the institutions and it's down to the allies, the ones who are actually creating it, to come up with the statement. It's like, I think it was Daniel Kalula in an interview that used the example that it was like having an old woman in a house burgled, and then going to the old woman to explain the activities of the burglar, and going, so why did he burgle you? Why did she burgle you? Why did he burgle you? Why did they burgle you? I don't know. Ask the burglar. Right? And asking the person, what do we need to do to stop you being burgled again? How about you ask the burglar? Right? So in a case, a lot of the time, those who are, and I resist the term victim. I really don't like the term, but those who are affected are the ones those who are on the receiving end are often the ones who are sought out to find a solution. And I think that just adds salt to the wound, right? And so if you're the person who's been wounded, this episode is for you. This session is for you. Okay. So one of the things that I want to talk about is, like I mentioned, coping strategies. I think it's really important for us not to deal with things alone. There are certain aspects of things you need to deal with alone, right? You need to look at what this means for you, what you are actually feeling. What other people might be feeling may not be what you are feeling. Okay. There might be some people who are completely functional through this. You might not be, and that's okay. There might be other people who are enraged and they're shouting and stuff, and you might not be, and that's okay. There might be people who are sad. There might be people who are exhausted. There might be people who are numb to the whole thing. And you might be feeling something different. You might be listening to other people who look and are coming from places that you come from, might be telling you that you should be feeling a certain way, and you might not be. But let me tell you, that's actually okay, because everyone handles things completely differently. Like, the main thing is to figure out what's going on with you, to stop and say, okay, what am I feeling? How do I want to react? Or is there something that I need in this moment? Is there some support? Is there a book I need to read? Is there a tool I need to put into action? Is there something I need to give to? Is there an advocacy that I can do? Like, what do I need to do? One of the things that I want to bring up right now, which, let me show this to you. Let me see if I can can I flip the camera around? I don't think I can. Oh, yes, I can. Okay, cool. Let me show you this thing, because this is something that was really important for me when it came to what to do about what happens in the world. Because I found that when stuff like this happens, when there's brutality, when there's institutional issues of pressure, when there's all kinds of things that happen, people often are drawn towards a certain type of response as the right way or the big way or the main way to respond, when actually it's an ecosystem. So if you haven't heard about it before, there's a social what's it called? The social change map, the social change ecosystem. And I'm going to show it to you right now. Okay. 1 second. This is giving a bit of the behind the scenes. All right. Those of you who are online, you can't see this, but I'm just going to talk you through it. Okay. There we go. So you have the guides, you have the weavers, you have the experimenters, you have the frontline responders, you have the visionaries, you have the builders, you have the caregivers, you have the disruptors, you have the healers, you have the storytellers, right? And all of those roles put together create this equity, liberation, justice, and solidarity, right? So we need all of you. Some of you might be the person who is actually going to emotionally support the people who are on the front lines. Some of you are the ones who are going to build companies and frameworks and all that kind of stuff. Some of you are the ones who are going to have the ideas of how we're going to get through this. Some of you are the ones who are going to try things and fail and risk and put money where the mouth is. Some of you are going to be the storytellers, the ones who are going to be there to actually tell the story so that people later on will be able to know what happened here. Some of you are going to be the healers, the ones who are going to be there to support emotionally, spiritually. Some of you are going to give hope. Some of you are the disruptors who are going to walk into these institutions and tear it down. Some of you are going to be having all these roles, and none of them are more or less important than each other. Each of us have our own strengths, our gifts, and it's important for us to recognize what those are and not to minimize the impact of other people's gifts, right? And I wanted to share that with you because I thought it was important that we acknowledge that in this time when people are experiencing or seeing the same things, we are not experiencing it the same way. Some of you are going to be internalizing it in such a way that it's actually going to lead you towards burnout because it's something that you can't escape. And one of the things that I would say when it comes to those kind of moments is if you can't escape it, what can you do about it? And sometimes there might not be something immediate you can do about it that's going to have change that you can see in the moment, but there might be something that you can contribute to. So, for example, if you're in the workplace, how can you um, garner the support of other people within the workplace with you? Do you have a union? Do you have an ERG group, employee research group, resource group, who are going to be able to support you? Do you have someone you know in Parliament who can look at how to create some kind of social change or some kind of policy framework that's going to be implemented? Do you have someone who, like looking at your ecosystem of network of people around you, do you have the energy to do anything at all? Right? Do you have the energy to do anything at all? Because the thing about burnout is you're tired a lot of the time, right? Or you're overstimulated. Like, do you have the energy to do that? Sometimes it looks like, okay, I'm going to hibernate for 3 weeks before I do anything. I just need a moment where I don't feel anything, right? I need a moment where I need to pause for a second. This is my chrysalis stage. I need to just lay on the couch and watch TV for a bit and not turn on my phone and just watch my favorite comedy. I just need to watch Friends for 3 weeks straight, right? I need to do that before I can get to a stage where I can do anything at all. Yeah. Like there's actually a moment where you need to be honest with yourself. Like, what do you need right now? What do you need? Is it to pause? Is it to, channel that energy into something or into someone so that they can do something? Um, so I think, yeah, Femi, I had to talk about it today because it's something that I tend to uh, like, you know me, I tend to handle my emotions all the time. I tend to go into action mode a lot, and I tend to skip over what I'm actually feeling. And I think this week I found that difficult. So, okay. So, I'm just going to go to my notes. So so we've got our coping strategies. Okay, what do we do to cope with these things that are happening in the world that we're aware of, that we're made aware of, that we can't escape? Okay, I mentioned about seeking opportunity, seeking support from community organizations. They're out there, and at the end, I'm going to give a list of some of these that you can get in contact. Getting a therapist, I can't reiterate enough. Like, just having someone who is there just to create a space for you to figure out what's going on with you, how things are affecting you, and how you're dealing with things or how you're not dealing with things, and what you need in the moment. Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes we need someone who is a professional to help us, and there's no shame in that. I think we all need it. And there's also things like self-care practices, right? For those of you who lean towards advocacy, there's important elements of social justice where you actually move into action when you empower yourself and contribute to healing from trauma by doing something about the thing that's causing the trauma. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to give you some of the ideas of what that could be. You can educate yourself on what's happening, right? Whether it's history or the impact of racism, or the history or politics of what's going on in the world that brought us to the situations that we're seeing right now, and not just getting it from one source, get it from a range of sources. Like, what you'll find is that the way that UK tells a story is going to be different to the way America tells a story, which is going to be different to the way the Middle East tells a story, right? So get a range of them. What the story that's told is never the story that's told. They say there's three truths: yours, mine, and the actual truth, right? So don't rely on just one source of information. Number two is support and amplify the voices of marginalized communities by listening and learning from their experiences. If you listening is so important, like not shutting down and not ignoring what people are actually going through, and actually just listening to with empathy. Okay, support people who are experiencing on the receiving end of this. Like, you might be experiencing it, but other people might be experiencing it in a different way. Support each other. Okay, and learn from their experiences, figure out what they're doing and how they're feeling, or how they're going through and how they deal with things. You might find that there's something they're doing that you're not doing that could help. Number three is engage in conversations about race and privilege with friends, family, and colleagues to raise awareness and promote understanding. This is if you have the energy. One of the things I'm very conscious of, to have the capacity for conversations, because I throw myself in there and I do this. I do facilitation. So I have that capacity. The average person may not have the capacity. And you might stumble across, someone might just ask you a question and you find yourself within a conversation that you're not ready for. If you're not ready for it, have the courage to say, you know what, I'm not ready for this conversation right now. You're going to have to find someone else to have this conversation with. I'm just not going to have it. And walk away or change the topic or whatever it is. But if you are ready for it, be ready for it. And one of the things I would say, it's random connection, but with consent. Just because you say yes to it at the beginning doesn't mean you're going to be saying yes to it all the way through. Pay attention to how you feel as the conversation goes on. I've been in situations where I had all the energy at the beginning, but about 5-10 minutes in, I'm like, you know what? I overestimated myself. I don't have the energy for this right now. I need to call it quits. Okay, cool. You're right. I'm out. You know, getting out of it that way, because it is important for you to protect yourself in these situations. We need you. Okay. It might be looking like advocating for policy changes and initiatives that address systematic racism and promote equality, right? It might be participating in protests, rallies, community events that um, support racial justice and equity and etc. Right? It might be supporting Black-owned businesses and organizations that are working towards positive change. We've got Black Pound Day, which is a great initiative that highlights a lot of this, right? You've got all these other Black-owned businesses. Support them, put the money where their mouth is, right? You can vote for political leaders who prioritize diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism initiatives, right? You can challenge the stereotypes and biases within yourselves and others to promote more inclusive and equitable societies, right? I think you've all seen that image of the three children fence, right? And there's so many different versions of it. And there's the one with the boxes and stuff. And after a while, you got to get rid of the fence. Okay. Yes, Tessie. Long time. How you doing? I'll be back in Sierra Leone in December, by the way. So I'm sure I'll catch up with you all then. You can donate. You can take action in your own community by volunteering, organizing events, and supporting initiatives, etc. Right? Or you can create. One of the things here is you can create safe spaces. Safe spaces are so important, man. This is literally what I do. Like creating safe spaces. Sometimes you just need to vent. Sometimes you need to shout. Sometimes you need to scream. Sometimes you need to know that there's other people around you who are experiencing what you're experiencing, right? To share, to process, to find solidarity, to heal. Sometimes you need that. One of the things that's really important, though, is self-compassion. Being kind to yourself. If you need to turn things off, turn them off. If you need to walk away, walk away. If you need to take some time off, take some time off. Even if you need to hire a babysitter so you can go away for the weekend, do that. Yeah. If you need to stay in bed for another hour, do that. You know, if you need to sit in front of the TV and just eat popcorn while watching a movie and cry, do that. Yes, Venus. Do that. Do that. Like the unfortunately, there are certain things, like I said, Rome wasn't built in a day, neither is it going to be destroyed in a day. If you need something in this moment right now, give yourself that. And be honest with yourself about what that is. Is it a hug? Is it $1 million? Yeah. Is it like what is it? What do you actually need? What is it that you need in this moment to be able to get to the other side of whatever you're feeling? Okay. Because if we don't have self-compassion, we're just going to keep beating ourselves up for what we're not doing. And I've seen too much of this. Something happens and someone who doesn't have the capacity to do is beating themselves up for not having the capacity to do. And that's not going to get anybody anywhere. It's only going to make things worse for you. It's only going to make things worse for the struggle. And we're going to end up losing you. We're going to end up losing you to burnout, to depression, to I think it's important for us to have self-compassion, to process, to give ourselves the space to process what we're going through, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, the sensations that are happening in our bodies right now. Can you even put a word to it? Is there a combination of words, right? Like, for example, I might say I'm angry, but it's actually rage, right? But it's not just rage. It's sadness. It's disappointment at still being here. It's bewilderment at how generations in the cycle continues. It's a lack of hope. It's all these things. And one of the things that I find about when it comes to burnout and experiencing it is that we can often look for one word to describe everything. Sometimes it's not just one word, or sometimes it's a combination of words. Sometimes it's a combination of experiences, of emotions. Yes, Nick. Yes, Rosie. Yes, Alice. Yes, Valona. Thank you for being here and sharing in this moment. And I know, and it's, yeah, there's a lot. The last thing I want to share before I go is the actual resources, because one of the things that I find is there is actually support out there. Okay, I think there's a lot of people handling things alone when they don't have to be. There are organizations, there are health resources, there are community groups that are supporting you right now. Some of them need funding, some of them need support, but they do exist. I'm going to give a list of them right now, specifically for people in the UK, just because I'm conscious that how we experience things is slightly different to how they experience them in America. We can sometimes feel like they're Mark 1 and we're Mark 2, but we experience things as well. And there's this secondhand, excuse me, there's this idea of a secondhand trauma when actually when we leave the house, we experience it as well. So if you're in UK, there's Black Minds Matter UK. They provide free mental health support to Black individuals in the UK through therapy sessions and with Black therapists. My therapist is Black. And one of the things I appreciate about him is he's honest with how he experiences things, even as a therapist, because therapists are humans too. Know that he acknowledges the things that I'm going through was really important to me. And that brings me to number 2, which is where I found him, was the Black African and Asian Therapy Network, BAATN. They offer therapy and support services specially tailored to the needs of Black, African, and Asian communities. That's where I found my therapist, and it's a directory, so you can actually search for whatever your challenge is, and it will give you people who specialize in that, and then you get connected to them directly that way. You've got Sister Space, who needs support, by the way. They provide support and advocacy for Black women and girls who have experienced domestic abuse and sexual violence. You have the Ubele Initiative. They work to support the capacity and sustainability of Black-led organizations and social enterprises in the UK. You also have Black Thrive. They're a partnership between communities, statutory organizations, and voluntary sector agencies working to address mental health inequalities in Black communities. You also have IMCAN, that's IMKAAN. That's a UK-based Black feminist organization dedicated to addressing violence against Black and minoritized women and girls. You also have the Black Cultural Archives, and they're based in Brixton, right? They preserve and celebrate the history and heritage of Black people in Britain, providing educational resources and community events. So, and they're actually a great place to go to if you need signposting to other things. Then you have the Race Equality Foundation to promote race equality, health, and social care services, providing resources and advocacy for Black individuals and communities. Those are just 8 of those organizations within the UK who you may need help from. I encourage you to actually go and seek help. Okay. There is really no shame in it. And I've had conversations with people who are like, oh no, I don't want to do this because only so-and-so kind of people need this kind of help. No, which humans, we need that kind of help. And the fact that we're not accepting help is part of the problem a lot of the time. If you need help, go get it, right? If you don't want to tell people about it, then fine, just do it for you. Send them an email, Google it, find out what's local to you. There might be an organization exactly what you're going through. Might be you too, Rosie. We need to catch up as well. And thanks for the message you sent me before. I watched that video and I follow him, and he's speaking the truth a lot of the time. And so get that help. If you're experiencing things and you're struggling to process it, struggling with the emotions, get that help. It might be that you need a coach. I help people recover from burnout and avoid it as well. And yesterday, I spent the day as a coaching marathon with people who needed help at reduced rate. That day's gone now. I'm back to my normal rates. So, but if you need help, I offer drop-in sessions, which I'm kind of leaning away from, just because there's only so much you can do with one session. You kind of need to keep working through things. So I offer packages which are 6 and 12 week packages, and then there's the annual package, which is basically access to everything. Every you get one-to-ones, you get group sessions, you get retreats, you get courses, the whole shebang. And if you want information on that, just message me, DM me. I offer it to individuals, but I also offer it to organizations. If you want to support people within your company who need help and you don't necessarily provide the service, yeah, just get in touch with me. DM me, message me. I'm still building the website at the moment, but it's going to be out this week. So you can see what I offer on an individual as well as a organizational level. Whatever it is today, just to recap, we've looked at what do you do when you can't escape the stressor. The stress, external forces that's creating the pressure, the stress, and the stress being the emotion, the sensations that you feel within. We talked about, I gave you a brief introduction on the connection between burnout and social trauma. I talked about the impact of social trauma on the individual. I talked about coping strategies. I talked about advocacy and activism. I talked about creating safe space. I talked about self-compassion. And I've talked about finding resources and support. I also talked about the social change model ecosystem. That is an important thing to figure out where you fall in the ecosystem of social change. Like I said, if you need any help, any more support, contact me direct. But don't wait. It doesn't have to be me, but speak to somebody. If you're going through it, speak to somebody. There's a lot going on in the world right now. Every time you open your phone, every time you're exposed to another thing that is another trigger that is keeping you in a state of stress, a state of burnout, and you don't feel safe. You don't feel supported. You don't feel seen. And you have to go out there and be functional. And we are not designed to be under this kind of stress all the time. So if this is you, contact somebody. Okay, don't deal with it yourself, please. I beg. We need you. Okay, we need you. So speak to somebody. Thank you for your time, and for those of you who were here when I had my little breakdown halfway through, thank you for hanging on and just being there. Sometimes it's you just got to let it out in it. They say tears are pain leaving the body, and sometimes you got to let them leave. You got to let them go. It's part of your process, part of your healing. It's just that it doesn't always happen when you're when you're live. But thank you. And tomorrow I'm going to be talking about something else. I think I'm going to be talking about joy tomorrow for balance, and joy and its impact on and joy and its effect on burnout recovery. So thank you very much for your time. No problem, Nick. And if you've missed it, watch the whole thing again. I think this is probably the most honest I've been in a long time. I could have paused. I could have turned it off, but I just had to sit with it. And sometimes we need to do that and just sit with it and just go through it, because the actual sensations, the feelings, they don't always last. Sometimes we just need to get through the tunnel. The worst thing we can do is to stop in the middle of it. Thank you, Alice. I'm glad. And yeah, like I said, if anybody needs any help, get in touch. I'm gonna head off now because I need to have breakfast and then get my day started. But I will speak to you all soon. Love.